Yep.
All right, recording on. In recent news, a terrible train accident in Palestine, Ohio, has occurred, causing harsh chemicals to spill, polluting the air and contaminating the residents' drinking water. Residents have already felt the physical effects from breathing the air and drinking contaminated water, which has left many sick. The train company Norfolk Southern has issued false statements to residents stating that the surrounding air and water has not been affected by the chemical spill due to the train accident. Yet residents still complain that they smell chemical odors as well as had symptoms of feeling unwell. Unethical practices from Norfolk Southern have not only upset the local residents, but they have also acquired strict enforcement by the EPA to not only pay to clean up their mess, but to also abide by new safety regulations due to the organization's negligent safety protocols. This has all created a negative reputation for Norfolk Southern, which is why moral leadership is very important in order to develop a reputation for ethical leadership within an organization. In this article analysis presentation, our group members, Karen, Paul, Ludvin, Cecy, and myself, will be covering different parts of this article, such as the key concepts of the dual pillars approach to ethical leadership in terms of pillar one being a moral person and pillar two being a moral manager. Then we will cover other key concepts on what does ethical leadership accomplish, how to cultivate a reputation for ethical leadership, and assuming the role of being a moral manager. By the end of this article analysis presentation, you will have a good understanding as to why moral individuals and leadership play an important role in developing a positive reputation for ethical leadership. To begin, the first pillar of approach to ethical leadership is to not only be a moral person, but also be seen as being ethical by others based off of certain moral characteristics. The article has stated that simply saying a leader is a moral person does not automatically make others view them as being ethical, but instead they may view the leaders as being somewhere between amoral or ethically neutral. Although some say that challenges arise in an organization because executives are not actively involved with their employees, the article has also stated that it doesn't take long to know if someone is a true ethical leader or not, as you can easily determine this based on how well they conduct themselves through their traits, their behaviors, and decision-making abilities. Traits of a moral person are the substantive basis of ethical leadership, which are individuals with characteristics associated with integrity, truthfulness, and honesty. The definition of integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness, which the article also explains that integrity is the most cited trait when executives are asked what attributes an ethical leader has. The characteristics of integrity, honesty, and trustworthiness overlap each other as they all consist of credibility of being ethical. That is important. Sorry, my dog. That is important in building long-term relationships between executives, their employees, and their customers as well. Next are the behaviors which are important in ethical leadership because the actions from executives are what allow traits to be expressed to others, even if employees are not there to observe them. Leaders are constantly being observed and judged by their followers from the way they act, even behind closed doors, which is why integrity has great influence over a leader's behavior. The Pygmalion effect, I think I pronounced that right, which the textbook refers to as leaders' attitude toward and expectations of followers and their treatment of them explain and predict followers' behavior and performance, which is a perfect example as to why behavior from executives is important, because the actions of leaders have tremendous influence over the behaviors and performance of the employees. In addition, theory X and theory Y can be used to explain and predict the performance levels of leadership from the way leaders behave towards their followers. If a leader has a negative attitude towards their followers or is unethical and is unwilling to seek input from others, then it is said that these type of leaders have theory X attitudes. Theory Y leadership behaviors and traits are the opposite of theory X, as theory Y leaders display more of a positive attitude towards their followers. They're also more open to what they have to say, and the business relationships have higher morale within the organization. Executives who are approachable care for the well-being of their employees and their openness to address issues in a professional manner can create an environment for building a reputation of ethical leadership. The last pillar the last part in pillar 1 in building a reputation for ethical leadership is an executive's ability to make decisions in which ethical leaders are seen to make decisions based on their own moral values and principles that they stand by. In order to build a reputation for ethical leadership, leaders have to strive to be objective and fair, not allowing their own personal feelings or biases to influence their decisions. Ethical leaders must also make decisions that also take into consideration of the concerns of how they might affect society. Norfolk Southern knew that they were not following safety protocols and upkeeping their trains, which ultimately led to the train derailment. They also didn't take into consideration how the train derailment might affect the local community, and they also chose to make unethical decisions by trying to cover up their tracks and provide false information to the community. Moreover, executives must follow ethical decision rules such as the golden rule, which was one of the rules that was listed in the article, where executives ask themselves questions such as how their decisions might affect others. The article also stated ethical leaders should ask themselves whether they would like to see the action they're contemplating on tomorrow's basically front page, which sounds very fitting to the unethical decisions made by Norfolk Southern. Overall, being a moral person influences the traits, behaviors, and decision-making abilities for an ethical leader, which builds a reputation for ethical leadership within the organization. Now we will move on to covering pillar 2.
Okay, I will be going over pillar 2, which is moral manager. Next slide. Okay, so what is a moral manager? Moral managers are leaders who conform high standards of ethical behavior or professional standards of conduct, motives, goals, orientation toward the law, and general operating strategy. In order to develop a reputation for ethical leadership, a heavy focus on the leadership part of that term is required. The executive's challenge is to make ethics and values stand out from a business landscape. Moral managers recognize the importance of proactively putting ethics at the forefront of their leadership agenda. Some key premises are that executives need to make the ethical dimension of their leadership explicit to their employees. Executives who fail to do this risk being perceived as ethically neutral because of other persuasive messages about financial success take over. Moral managers serve as a role model for ethical conduct in a way that is visible to employees. They communicate regularly and persuasively with employees about ethical standards, principles, and values. Finally, they use the reward system consistently to hold all employees accountable to ethical standards. Next slide. Here are the initial findings of moral management. In the United States, the first prominent of moral treatment was Benjamin Rush. He was a Philadelphia physician. Rush had been one of the signers of the American Declaration of Independence. Moral treatment was a product of the Enlightenment of the late 18th century. Before then, people with psychiatric conditions, referred to as the insane, were usually treated in humane and brutal ways. During the second half of the 19th century, the optimism surrounding moral treatment began. Moral treatment was an approach to mental disorder based on humane psychosocial care or moral disciplines that emerged in the 18th century and came to the fore for much of the 19th century, deriving partly from psychiatry or psychology and partly from religious or moral concerns. Next slide. So, why is moral management needed? It promotes productivity. Employees under ethical management teams are often more productive. They may replicate the moral behavior of their leaders, encouraging them to work harder and promote the company's values. Ethical management can also facilitate positive relationships between employees and boost overall morale. Moral leadership is professional ethics is fundamental to boosting employee morale and establishing a healthy atmosphere of respect, trust, and transparency at work. The essential meaning of moral leadership is promoting employee engagement, increasing productivity, and enhancing brand image by teaching employees to be accountable, responsible, and honest. It can also increase business performance. The overall objective of ethical management is needed to build cooperation, encourage team cohesion, but also recognition between employees and their superiors. Moral leaders have a strong sense of self and are open minded individuals who are willing to listen and consider diverse perspectives. Next slide. So, here I am using In and Out as an organization that revolves around moral management. So, the organizational mission of In and Out is providing the freshest, highest quality foods and services for a profit and a spotless, sparkling environment whereby the customer is our most important asset. The first In and Out location opened its doors in October 22 of 1948. It is a family-owned business that is now guided by Harry and Esther Snyder's granddaughter, Lindsay. This store has grown into 334 locations in 6 states, which are California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Texas, and Oregon. Next slide. So, In N Out's organizational value is among the core values of In N Out are integrity, honesty, and respect. Through the hiring, training, and management of In N Out associates, we strive to enforce these values every day, ensuring that every person in our company is treated in accordance with federal, state, and local laws. This relates to moral management because In N Out's values are focused on moral principles, which are integrity, honesty, and respect. And as I mentioned, moral managers serve as a role model for ethical conduct in a way that is visible to employees. In and Out has a supporting leadership structure. They provide a positive culture for their employees, both new and those who have been there for a while. Their culture is so friendly because the company is and has always been family owned. The lack of franchising has kept the culture of the company honest. Their commitment to fresh, high quality ingredients and superior service is evidence of this positive culture. And lastly, they have an open door policy structure. They want employees to give back input on how they can overall better the company's service. Next slide.
And that looks like it's me. My name is Paul, and my role in the project is what does ethical leadership mean? Now, when we talk about ethical leadership, it's basically a behavior, right? So if you have a behavior and your behavior is to enforce a set of principles and values that are consistent with the standards of the common good, that's what we mean by ethical leadership. Okay, and that was kind of just summing it up. Some of the things to consider from a leadership role, you want to be able to infuse an organization with principles that help develop employees. So, with COVID that we've seen the past couple of years, we're starting to see, some of the employees come back to work, right? That were working from home. And we still have employees that are still at home that don't want to come back to work. And I can see why. And then obviously people that are working offsite, that's a little bit different from people that are at home. But imagine this, if let's just say you're an offsite working employee. Well, one of the things is when you're outside, you're viewed by the public, right? So people can kind of keep an eye on you, things like that, where they can kind of show up to a job site or show up to an area where you're working, and then kind of keep tabs on you. If you're at home, your ethical standards might be a little bit different than some other person's standards. And I think we've probably heard stories in the news where people have thought that their screens were off, and they went to go maybe play some video games while they're on the clock. Those are the ethical things that we're talking about. So people not doing the right thing, and then there's also people that are doing the right thing. They're holding themselves accountable. Little to no supervision, and then that's exactly what happens when you're off-site work and you're away from the big company, or you're away from your company that you're at. There's really no supervision. Kind of the same thing at home too. So those are things that we mean by ethical leadership: doing the right thing when no one's looking, in a sense, right? That's the definition of integrity. Next slide, please. One of the coolest things that I've actually had a chance to read lately was something on autonomous vehicles. I came across the Harvard Business Review, and there's an article about these autonomous vehicles. And basically, if you don't know what autonomous vehicle is, it's an operation without human involvement. So when we're thinking AI, when we're talking about different, things of that nature, we start to see where we can go wrong with ethical standards, right? Or we can see the interruption in life because ethical standards are not there, or maybe they're not as prevalent, or maybe they're there, and the company's views are A, B, and C. Everything has to be ethically standard from this point. But who's to say that the creator or the engineer or whoever it is that's making these different programs really has the right ethical views, right? Or values or things like that. So a lot of people think that building an electric car could be pretty straightforward, right? It's not true. These vehicles will need to make difficult decisions when it comes to saving a life. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a car, and you can see by my graphic below, there's a car that's going down the street. You're in this car, and there's 4, maybe 5 of you in the car. And the vehicle has to figure out, okay, what do I do if somebody just darts out in front of the car? Do I stop the car, or do I maneuver it a different way? The car has to figure out whether it wants to save 1 life or maybe 5 lives. So these are all ethical decisions that we're not really aware of, and that we're really not in tune with every day of our lives. A lot of us jump in a car, whether you have an electric car, a gas car, it doesn't really matter, but we jump in the car and we assume that everything in the car is going to work right. I know in my car, when I back up, it makes a beeping sound, and that beeping sound is really annoying. But at the same time, it makes you aware of any type of surroundings that may get in the way of the vehicle. So these are things that we're trying to look at now as far as autonomous vehicles. Are people making the right decisions, right? So those are things that we're faced with every day. Okay, next slide, please. So what does ethical leadership accomplish, right? We looked at what ethical leadership is. We've looked at an example, electric vehicles, AI, things like that. Those are great examples to look at. But we want to kind of bring it around and kind of full circle it here. And what does it accomplish? Is it good for business? Well, some people say it's great for business, and I think so too. But what does that statement actually really mean? Well, what happens is that it results in the contribution of employee commitment to an organization. Now, basically what that means is, you have an employee that's committed to what we're putting out, all of our ethical standards, and we have to make sure that we follow them every single day, right? This also comes into play when we attract and retain our best employees. So trying to find good employees. I've been at jobs before where, we didn't really hire a good employee, right? Well, we start looking around the room and we can see, a lot of these other people in here may not really have good ethical, standards. One thing I could probably think of is, and I really, if anyone's a tow truck driver, I'm sorry, but tow truck drivers, I've had a guy tow my car before, and I was so upset. And when, I went down to get my car, everybody down there looked at me like, I was from another planet or something. But I was just so upset. And I looked around and I'm like, you guys probably don't have any good ethical, standards sometimes, because maybe someone left their car, outside for a sec to take in groceries, and they parked in a spot they shouldn't have, but they had no choice, right? And then they get their car towed. So that to me would be something where I would go, okay, that's not cool, right? So we want to attract and retain our best employees. We want to imitate good behavior, lead by example. I got two graphics down there. I got one on the left. It's got Bart Simpson. We all know Bart Simpson from The Simpsons. If you don't know Bart Simpson and you just woke up from a coma from 30 years, then you get a pass, right? So Bart is basically saying leading by example. He's writing it over and over and over like he got in trouble, right? Because Bart Simpson's always in trouble. So we look at one standard, which is unethical. So we assume that Bart Simpson is unethical in some ways. And then we look at the one on the right, where it's a pretty cool little slogan I saw, and it was, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. At the end of the day, you got to figure out what side are you on, right? So I'm picking the side where, we have a good leader, a strong leader, who can show us, who can guide us through and help us, right? So those are things that I want to leave, everything with, and make sure everyone kind of understands. So bad example on the left and good on the right. All right, I'm finished from here. Next slide. Thank you.
Cultivating a reputation for ethical leadership is a must for organizations. The following concepts are all applicable to build or further strengthen ethical leadership in an organization. The first concept is building a reputation for ethical leadership in the workplace. A reputation will help set the example on what employees can expect from leadership, while also advertising to customers or potential employees outside of the organization on what values they can expect from the organization. Cultivating a reputation should start from the top to bottom. Leaders should pass on their ethical values to their employees to help expand the values to the entire organization. Find mentors who hold the same values or even stronger values than the ones you hold. The knowledge they can pass on to you from their experience will help strengthen your values. Have an understanding of what it means to be an ethical leader. There will be easy, unethical routes you can take in life that will bring success and rewards. Remain disciplined to not fall for these temptations. Value integrity, treat your employees well by acknowledging and rewarding them for their success. Next slide. Establish anonymous channels to allow employees to feel comfortable reporting misconduct in the workplace. Establishing a code of conduct will set standards in place for employees to follow. The code of conduct will allow employees to understand what to expect if they break workplace rules. Ensuring your employees understand your ethical leadership is very important. You might think that you display your ethical leadership skills in the workplace, but to employees, they might think the very opposite. They could think that you don't show enough of your ethical leadership skills to them. To understand how your employees perceive you, conduct surveys to see what their thoughts are. Some employees might be uncomfortable with the surveys and fear retaliation for their comments. Take this feedback from your employees to improve on what you lack. Next slide.
Now we're going to get into assuming the role of a moral manager. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is a moral manager? A moral manager is someone that motivates, has goals, and inspires others to succeed. They are also a role model through visible action, treats all employees equally, is a role model for ethical behavior in highly visible ways, communicates about ethics and values, holds people accountable, acknowledges, rewards, and disciplines the ethical behaviors of others. They're also approachable, empathetic, understanding, and helpful. They have a true concern for people and protect and develop their staff. Next slide, please. So why is it important to have moral managers? They create a positive work environment. They improve the brand image and good reputation. They also increase the productivity. They get customer loyalty. Employees work harder and promote the company's value. They have positive relationship between employees and management, and increases the productivity and overall employee morale. They set a good example, which then has the employees follow their footsteps. Next slide. So some of the research findings that I found are more leaders are in demand now more than ever. There was a research done, and the findings were that the highest percentage of employees will leave the organization if they did not have a moral manager. Also, the highest percentage will receive a paid deduction if that meant that they will have the leadership of a moral manager. It has also been said that moral leadership is good for business and it drives up business performances. Unfortunately, many of the organizational leaders do not consistently demonstrate moral leadership behavior, leading a small percentage of high-level moral leaders. Next, please. Some of the organizational implications. What does it do? Why is it so important to have moral managers in organizations? It's because it does create a better sense of loyalty to the organization. Employees become better performers, helps create a positive work culture, establishes clear guidelines for behavior and ethics, helps create trust and respect in the workplace, creates better productivity and satisfaction within the organization, and also having ethical practices protects both the employer and the employee from any legal issues. Next slide. An example of a moral manager is Cheryl Bachelder. She is the CEO of Popeyes. She was previously the CEO of KFC for a few years, and in 2007, she became the CEO of Popeyes. She is known to be a visionary and ethical leader. She created a new workplace where people were treated with respect and dignity. She focused on the franchise because she believed that by taking care of restaurant owners, then they will take care of their employees. She believed that Popeyes needed to serve the people that invested in Popeyes because for them, it wasn't just a 9-to-5 job. It was their life. She listened and responded to their needs. By doing this, Cheryl saw the increase in customer service satisfaction, and it led to more loyal customers. By 2014, sales were up 25%, profit was up 40%, the market share had increased 7%, and the stock price went from $13 to $78. One of her favorite quotes, it was, "I must know you to grow you." Next slide. So in conclusion of all this, you must build a reputation for ethical leadership. You either fall into the moral person or moral manager dimension. It all depends on the perspective that people have of you. Being a moral manager, you become a role model for conduct. You must communicate with those around you about ethics and values and set the example so that they may follow in your footsteps. Being a moral manager plays an important part in employees' commitment and loyalty to their organizations, which then helps the company strive and succeed. And lastly, our last slide is all references. Thank you for your time.